there, everybody. It's pretty hot out. So hot, in fact, that I am bringing around this older pop-up tent while I'm doing my work today, just to stay in the shade wherever it is that I am. And yeah, we're down by the edge of the woods. We are just off of the side of one of our paths, and you'll recognize where we are shortly. Just in front of us are some pots and some plants. Let's dig a little deeper and we'll talk about things. We are just next to some of our high bush cranberries, the viburnums, and we can see pretty readily that there has been some browse on these plants. And while longtime viewers of the channel probably recall that I do not fuss too much about browse, the browse does present a particular opportunity. So one of the things that happens when you get browse like this is that on these stems you'll get fresh growth. I don't know how well that's going to come up on camera. I'm not actively recording right now, so but you'll get new buds of growth along the stem at your leaf nodes. The other thing that will happen is that the plant senses this loss of vegetation here, and it sends down signals from the roots, or signals from the shoots, sorry, that new growth needs to occur, and that signal gets sent down to the roots, which then send up the nutrients to cause the new leaf swell and leaf growth. Now, Durr's manual, I'll put the thing right here, Durr's manual states that one of the propagation methods for viburnums as a family is to induce a hard cut at the end of a season and then stool layer to root the new growth that comes as that growth response the next season. And at the end of that growing season, you can split and lift out and then transplant out or pot the rooted cuttings that you've created by stool layering. In our own experiments on this site with stool layering, I have found it particularly pleasant to use a container. And some folks really like to have the welded wire, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the welded wire. It's probably equivalent. I don't see a reason not to use it, but by virtue of us running a nursery, we get a lot of pots. We get a lot of pots that are in mixed condition. We have folks reach out to us online and say, hey, I have a bunch of pots, I just did a garden, can I drop off pots to you to recycle? And I generally say yes, because it's a chance to meet new people. I'm sort of a hermit in the woods, so it's nice to see new people, and it's a good way to establish that relationship and that reputation in your community that you are someone who cares about reusing before the energy-intensive processes of recycling. And so what I like to do, rather than buying in welded wire or trying to scrounge it from folks or from the scrapyard where it's been bent and stomped and molded into shapes that I can't really unbend, I like to use the pots. And so I'm going to show you all the method that I use. Let me introduce you all to B.E.C.K.Y. B.E.C.K.Y is very adaptable. B.E.C.K.Y is right fitted as a solution. B.E.C.K.Y is a bottomless container. Bottomless, empty container kickstarts younglings. And I've talked on this channel before about some of our experiments with species like the elders, or with the haskap's, the Lonicera ceruleae, but we have some bigger B.E.C.K.Ys now, and we're going to put them around these slightly larger plants, and we're going to talk about it and the implications. So you can see here that B.E.C.K.Y has been torn asunder. This pot got some damage. I don't know who ran over it. It might have been me. Who can say? However, what we're going to do today is we're going to just very gently overlap this flap here. And I could grab binder clips, or we could take rope or sections of, say, baling twine from some of the hay we've bought in. But I also want to provide a little bit of deflection for these plants to allow them to rebound more fully before the deflection ceases to be effective. And so I'm actually going to, just for the sake of your own visibility on this, I'm going to turn her just a little bit. And so behind me, I have a number of willow cuttings that you can see are considerably dried out. These were trimmings from our neighbor's willow tree. And so all I'm going to do is kind of take this and just up against the butt of this pot, I'm just going to drive this in a little bit. And so my hope is that by staking around this pot, I'll be able to help keep the pressure against all of the woody material that we're hoping to see root. And we'll also be able to disencourage the browse from things who will have to contend with these deader branches, things that don't look appetizing or appealing. And we can, from there, just encourage the new growth of our intended plants. So I'm going to get this situated in a place that I like. We're going to make sure that it is keeping things steady. I also like to leave these little cutouts in the pot. They are a little sharp, but I'm not in the business of sanding plastic. That's gross. But it does allow for, little bits of expression outward. There's one branch in particular that is going to really appreciate having this little bit of extra space cut out for it while it shoots. And so before I go ahead and stick any more of these willow cuttings, I'm just going to start filling this pot up, and we're going to take it from there. I'll show you all kind of what it looks like as we go. And we'll remember to move the tag up for identification purposes, since we're going to be layering material in here for a little bit. So by giving it a little bit more growing material around the stems, we have the opportunity to send out a whole bunch more roots. And I'd be interested, those of you who practice this sort of plant propagation, I'd be interested to hear how you've been approaching the concept of stool layering intentional plants, and what your approaches are. Are you a fan of the ring of metal? Are you a fan of a simple mound? Do you find that certain species behave more predictably with one method than the other? I think that that would be an interesting conversation to have. So drop a comment. Let me and the rest of the group know how your experiments with stool layering are going. And I'll grab you all out of the grip in just a moment. Just level out some of this, and we'll kind of take a look. We'll see what's what inside. And I think the light is starting to come past where my tent goes. Darn. Okay, so you can see this is unbroken down duck bedding. A little bit wet. Some of it is a little bit dry. But way down here, we're just looking to get a little bit of soil contact with these stems, substrate contact. It doesn't have to be soil. Some people might like to use, I don't know, potting mix, but that seems wasteful when we compost so readily and have so much poop available. And so the duck manure is cooler than chicken manure. I'm not too worried about this burning the plant. And if I notice any kind of adverse effects on the foliage, I can absolutely just pluck B.E.C.K.Y away and spread this compost out, and we'll try again in the fall. But we're just going to bring this up another inch or two. I don't want it to be so deep that it stifles any new shoots that might come up from the base, but I also want it thick enough that it settles nicely against the stems. So a few more, and we'll talk about some implications. So just a little bit more, a few more scoops, and we will be done with this one and ready to move on to the next little viburnum that got bit back. So I guess now is a good time. The goal of me sharing this with you all is A, to encourage another reuse of your pots before they go to your landfill or your local recycling or transfer station or however it is called in your community. If the manufacturer or the distributor or the company that grew the plant and sold it to your local nursery outfit does not recycle their plants, I think it's in our best interest as gardeners, as civically minded folks who really think that food security and biological processes in gardening and capturing as much growth and recycling waste streams and capturing the potential of waste. I think those of us who are into those sorts of things should really take a look at finding those companies that won't do the right thing. Not your local nursery. Those folks might not know what the return policies on pots or the recycling proclivities of their distributor are until they try to make a return. But as end consumers, as plant buying people, as plant addicts, we should be asking our nursery friends, the local nurseries and the folks who do this and order in plants, we should be asking them how their distributors handle recycling, how they as a company handle the return and the reuse or the recycling or the return of these intensively produced plastic things. I know that some folks are going to say that all plastic is evil, and I'm not here to have that debate right now. But what I am saying is that reuse is always the first, after reducing, thing we should do as far as these things that take forever to break down are concerned. And so I feel good about using a waste product that I get from folks who are interested in reusing and recycling, and this is in part just to inspire them. Not that I don't want you to drop off your pots, please give me pots, but you know, if you've got one that's damaged and you're like, man, I love this plant, I want more of it, think about stool layering. Pop down to your library and see if they have a copy of the DERS manual, the manual for woody plant propagation. It's a phenomenal resource. There are other gardening books put out by the Royal Horticultural Society or the American Horticultural Society that will also discuss the plants that are most suited to this approach, but there are a vast number of woody perennial plants that can take kindly to this, and viburnum is definitely one of those families. And so let me grab you all out of your your spot will show this. I'm just going to wrap up the other one a little bit quicker than this. But yeah, consider that as a consumer, you have real power. You have real power to influence how these companies take care of the products they create and distribute, and how that reuse and recycling is handled. If we, as a collective, can reduce our traffic to those producers who don't take care of the environment that we are planting into, it is, I think, incumbent on us to take the products that they don't recycle and don't reuse and turn them into a way for us to no longer support that particular distributor. And I know that this revolves around a whole lot more legwork and homework on our part, but I really think it's worth the effort. So I'm just gonna finish up. We'll stick a few more things and I'll show you what it all looks like at the end. All right, so here is the final quote unquote result of the first round of substrate deposition on B.E.C.K.Y number 1. And so a few additional notes. I have not watered this in, and this will compact down a little bit as I add water. The water is coming from the swimming pools that we give the ducks when the drought occurs, as that's becoming a more frequent thing. And another note is that while they are definitely drying out and very, very sad, most of these are still fairly flexible. And so there is a possibility that these willows will root in the substrate that I've placed around the bottom to just help them in their efforts to contain this. And if they root, that's just an additional amount of biomass for me to use in this garden area, which has not seen its last edit yet. And if we come up here, we'll come back a few steps. And so now when the deer are coming up, they're gonna come up, they're gonna be like, oh, how's that plant I like doing? Oh, this isn't tasty. Let's go find out what else is in the garden. And there's a lot in the garden. And the more that we can blunt the brows on any one thing, the more the whole system will appreciate our efforts. Let's just take a moment to appreciate all the butterflies. Oh, that's B.E.C.K.Y. And I hope that you all will take this and run with it. Share your notes. Share some plants that you weren't expecting it to work for and did. Share your iterations, or if you have improvements. If you find that there are glaring missteps in my approach, please feel free to call me out on them and make me a better grower of plants. But the more important thing, I think, for all of us is when we are going to purchase new plants in, if we take those extra few minutes to have a conversation with another human about what's going to happen to the pots if I bring them back, what's going to happen to the pots if I don't. These sorts of approaches will enable us and empower us to stop rewarding the behavior that is destructive. And we can do it by feeding our addiction to new plants and gardening and sharing all of the bounty from our landscapes and our parcels. So, till next time, thanks for watching. Happy planting.